Welcome to Not Just Ads, the show where B2B brands discover how creator-led content drives pipeline, builds trust, and grows long-term brand equity. Each episode, we speak with business leaders, founders, and creators who are defining their categories. I'm your host, Marcus Sherwin, and this is the Creator Economy for B2B.
Hello and welcome today to Not Just Ads, the Creator Economy for B2B. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jeremy Boissinot. Jeremy is the founder of Favikon, which is a pioneer company in the creator space, and they're probably one of the firsts in the market. This is going to be a really exciting conversation for me because I'm really looking forward to getting into how it all came about, their explosive growth, and where Jeremy sees the future of B2B creators. So Jeremy, first of all, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much. That's a very nice introduction.
You have led the space in the B2B creator space. The company was founded, if I'm not wrong, back in 2019. Is that right?
Officially, we launched the first product right before COVID, so that would be like 2020.
Okay, cool. And maybe you could just tell us, because around that time, B2B creators were something like, there were creators with B2C and influencers, but within B2B in particular, it was something that it probably didn't have a name. Some people were doing stuff where they were doing collaborations and thought leadership and stuff, but I don't think that the actual thing of B2B creators was a thing then. Could you tell us a little bit about, like, how did the idea come about from you looking at, okay, there's an opportunity here? Maybe you could share a little bit around that.
Yeah, for sure. So right before Favikon, I was working for an agency where we were working with a lot of B2C influencers, especially on YouTube and Twitch. This was like a gaming agency. And my first idea was, okay, influencer marketing is a mess. Influencers, they had all the power because they could do anything they wanted and they had basically no accountability. And yeah, there was a very big disbalance between brands and influencers. So my first idea was really, okay, we need to rank influencers. We need to give a concrete data-based answer to, okay, is this influencer really worth it? Is this creator really influential, etc.? So that was my first idea. That's what we launched back in 2020. But at the time, it was mostly B2C. It was actually only B2C. It was Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, whatever. And the 2 first years, we were building this platform. We already had all the algorithms in place, but mostly for B2C. And then in 2022, as a marketing stunt, we launched a ranking for LinkedIn. We didn't have any rankings at the time. It was just a scoring system for influencers. So I remember I told my intern, I was like, you know what? We should do a ranking on LinkedIn. Just let's give it a shot. We had no tech whatsoever, no data, nothing. So we spent 2 weeks manually looking for LinkedIn influencers, writing down in a Google Sheet number of followers, etc. And we launched a ranking in France, just for France. And it worked really well. I was like, wow, people are really they're really loving it. So you know what? We should do a second edition the month after. It went even more viral. And then the third edition, it was better and better. And I was like, okay, you know what? We should try one worldwide. And I remember she was telling me, Jeremy, I'm going to quit. It's like, there's no way we're going to do this manually. And I was like, you know what? It's okay. We're going to put a freelancer on it. So it's about the 3 of us looking for profiles on LinkedIn. And at the time, there were so few profiles that it was actually super easy. So we released the ranking in the world. It went super viral. And honestly, it was a huge surprise because I had imposter syndrome. I was like, this is bullshit, but it's not super relevant. I'm sure we missed out on a few profiles, etc. It was heavily based on number of followers. Whatever, it worked. And that was end of 2022. I was like, okay, there's clearly a strong appetite for LinkedIn influencers. People wanted to see who's influential, and we were trying to have people actually create content. So we were like, okay, we need to build something on the B2B side, which is what we did for the whole year. In 2023, we built the tech around it with data for LinkedIn influencers, algorithm. We actually hired a data scientist to come up with the most technology possible to have a scalable system for rankings. And now we have, I think, 2 million rankings in real time for pretty much anything. So that's how Favikon exploded, because then we started to release these rankings at scale on any industry, any country, whatever. People started to share it. And voila, we didn't do paid ads, nothing, just people sharing the rankings. And that's how Favikon, moved up the next stage.
It's a really interesting story as well, because when I was doing some research beforehand, I saw you built this from scratch. You had an initial seed investment, I think you mentioned, and then since then it's been just pure product market growth. Your people are pulling people in based on the rankings.
I think, in 2022, two things happened. First thing is AI, obviously with the release of ChatGPT. And what people don't understand, I think, yet is that AI made it possible for B2B influencers to emerge for a good reason is that it made it much easier for anyone to actually create content. The big barrier that has always existed for influencers is that, okay, back in 2022, if you wanted to be an influencer, you needed to be good at videos, taking pictures, etc., because all the big platforms were heavily video and photo oriented, right? And then with AI and with LinkedIn putting more resources into content creation as well, you finally had a nice format for anyone because it was writing based. You just had to write stuff. So I think those two things in combination explained why in 2023 there was a huge surge of B2B influencers. To think that we played a part in it because our rankings went so viral that we created some sane competition in every market, any industry, any country. Every time we would release a country, some people would be pissed, would be motivated because they wanted to be in the ranking. In turn, was a virtual circle for anyone in the B2B creator economy and LinkedIn. And then in 2024, it started to be more widespread. LinkedIn started to roll out creator programs, whatever. So yeah, I think B2B influencer marketing is a new thing, like you said. I think before these years, there was a bit of things that were done with Twitter influencers. If you think about the B2B side, there were essentially two things. There were like B2B Twitter influencers. There were a few campaigns that were being made at the time, honestly, with B2B creators that were active on Twitter at the time. And also a lot of public speaking, hiring people to make a presentation for a big company about HR, sales related stuff. But at the time, it was pretty much an oligarchy. It was pretty, always the 20, 30 same faces kind of hogging. And for the anecdote, those people were like really angry at us because we kind of like democratized the whole thing. And because of us, the very same people who've been around for like 10, 20 years started to have fresh competition. So most of these people hate us now.
That's good though. Not that they hate you, but that there is competition, because it's like what you say. I think initially, probably when you think about B2B creators, there's maybe a few that had this massive reach and they were always there. They were taking up that vacuum.
Yes.
But when you bring out the rankings, you kind of see that just because you have a massive reach doesn't mean that you're relevant for every type of campaign. I think that's one thing a lot of people miss in B2B. They kind of think that virality is the key and this is what really drives the business outcome. Whereas in B2B, it's not the case. You're looking at who's built credibility with this particular buying group. Why are they relevant? Why do they trust them? And then how does that relate to a business outcome then as well?
Especially on LinkedIn, where there's plenty of people who got a lot of followers because they had the first mover advantage. And I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of followers on LinkedIn who essentially have zero reach today. And that's why I always say follower number. I don't think it's useless. I do think it's useful for many reasons. But for LinkedIn, it's probably the only social media platform where LinkedIn follower number is pretty the less relevant in the grand scheme of things. Because of this reason, it was so easy at the time to just gain followers versus now.
And it's a very good point you bring up, because from what I see as well, even from people we speak with, people we work in the agency, but also in my time in LinkedIn, is like you can have a really high follower rate, but you may not have a huge amount of engagement because those followers have been built over the last few years. But you can have people that have much less follower, but the content that they're sharing is getting a lot of engagement because they're talking about a particular subject that's interesting, they're humorous, whatever it may be, but they have a lot of engagement because they're showing up on the platform consistently. But if you look at their follower count and you say, okay, it's below 10,000 or whatever, we only want 10,000 or more, sometimes there's a huge opportunity with niche creators that people overlook because they just look at follower count. Not only follower count, but it's part of their decision matrix. Do you, like, when people are coming to your platform and let's say they sign up and they're like, okay, look, I want somebody in cloud computing or something like that, what usually are some tips that you give people when they select creators, in your opinion, to get it right?
Yeah, just to be clear, we're talking a lot about rankings, but we have many other tools, including AI discovery. Like you said, I think especially for B2B influencers, expertise is going to be extremely important. Like, it's easy right now to get viral on LinkedIn if you do like motivational carousels, kind of like bullshit content through AI that has no consistency or like no core meaning or whatever. So I do think that expertise is critical for B2B influencers, which is why last year, we released an authenticity score, which takes into account the expertise of a creator, because we were starting to realize that it was critical to take that into account, to have this more quality-like metric for creators, especially for B2B creators, which made a lot of changes for rankings. Some people were like top 1, top 2, like overnight. They weren't even in the top 200 anymore. But yeah, if you work with a B2B creator, you need to make sure that it speaks to your ICP, to your audience. Those are things that already existed in the B2C space. It's the same if you work with an Instagram influencer, you need to make sure that the audience is the right fit. Although I think for B2B, it's even more critical because remember that huge chunk of B2B influencers, they're not doing it full time. They have jobs on the side, etc., which means that you need to be sure that your interests are aligned because every day I see brands working with creators and I'm like, Jesus, you're just wasting your money on that one. That's so obvious. But for some reason, marketers, when it comes to B2B creators, they're not doing their homework. I think they're so excited about this new channel and they're just thinking that, okay, this guy has 10K followers, lots of engagement, whatever, let's just work with him. But it really doesn't work that way. But yeah, we're just getting started. B2B influencer marketing is where Instagram was, B2C influencer marketing was maybe back in 2016. So it's very early and people are learning and we're hoping to be here to set the standards in the industry. That's always what we've been obsessed with since the very beginning is setting the standards.
How do you see it then from when you look at that? Like, what do you think is the standard? Obviously, it's getting the supply right, but then people that are learning to do it correctly and that it's something that it's not just a one-off, that it's something that actually B2B creator influencer marketing, this is part of our strategy now. We have a budget and it's allocated to this because we actually see that this drives business outcomes. Brands that are looking at testing it, what advice do you give them so that it works well, but that they're going along by those standards as well?
I think there's no single advice. It's a combination of many things. Again, I really think the content is critical. I do think that the content is even more important than the metrics per se. Like you said, like a niche influencer with 5,000 followers, but very deep and very smart content will be 100 times more efficient than someone with 100K followers, but like bullshit. And also the problem with LinkedIn, it's always been a big issue, is that people are obsessed with the algorithm. They're obsessed with having engagement and all, which is why many resort to like engagement pods. It's easy to hack the system on LinkedIn, easier than on others, because since it's very B2B, very polished, you really want to make sure that you have the best picture of yourself or whatever, best as much engagement as possible. You don't want to flop. People are terrified of posting in the first place because they think that all their family and friends are going to see it because everyone is on LinkedIn. So that's like a combination that makes it super easy to hack the system. But that makes it easy also for brands to pick the wrong people because again, if you look at the rankings, if you look at the authenticity score, some people are like, they have 0 out of 100 when it comes to authenticity. They are like getting destroyed by AI, but for a good reason. And those people are getting hired still on a daily basis because they don't know that we have this system that curates them. And many brands are still naive in this. So yeah.
I completely agree there. I think one of the things that probably brands don't necessarily look at, there's probably damage to their equity in terms of if they're working with the wrong creators. I spoke with the SVP in HP a couple of weeks ago, and we ran a campaign a while ago with them, and it was like 2 very relatively well-known UK influencers. And what his point was like, if we try and tie this to the business metric, they're well-known, but it doesn't really align with any business metric. So you need to be really careful in terms of who you're working with as a one-off, just assuming that they're a well-known face, that's going to equal some kind of a business impact, because it doesn't always.
No, it doesn't. Seriously, you can, honestly, if let's say tomorrow we work with, I don't know, even Mr. Beast on LinkedIn, I'm not even sure it would have any big impact for us because most of his audience wouldn't care about an influencer marketing platform versus the best influencer marketer you can think of. Let's say, for instance, Sarah Adam. I don't know if you know her. She's a big expert in influencer marketing. And last year she did a post saying that our software was great. It wasn't even paid. She was just super enthusiastic about it. And it was such a huge boost for us in terms of conversions, etc., because the people following her was the exact right audience for us. And she had, I don't know, maybe 20K followers at the time or something, but it was the exact fit. And that's what brands need to be obsessed with. You have a feature for that on Favikon, just so you know, we have a brand fit feature so that you can match your brand with a creator to make sure that it really aligns.
That's very useful as well. So if you look then on the distribution part, so let's say a brand comes to Favikon, they decide, okay, we're going to work with these 3 to 5 creators. We see that there's an alignment here. What do you recommend then normally? It's like, from what I see working, it's if you do this as a one-off and you do a campaign for a month, it doesn't always, you don't see the consistency there. You need to be
Yes.
taking like at least the same length as your sales cycle and B. You see that similar, or do you think it depends in terms of the sector within B?
It's not about one-off versus long campaigns. The reason why long ambassador campaigns were better is not because they do several posts, it's because it sounds more authentic. When you work just this one time with an influencer, people are going to know he did it for the money, versus someone who's committed for the long run, which this person is ready to put his face in front of a brand for a year, which means, okay, this guy is really into the brand. I trust him, so I'm going to buy it. And again, that's the issue that was really blatant in the B2C space, especially on Instagram a few years ago, is that influencers were doing so many campaigns, one-off campaigns, that their audience was getting saturated. There's this saturation rate, which in my opinion is the most important metric in the influencer space right now, is that if a creator, let's say 6 out of 10 posts are just an ad or a post for a brand, means that their audience is saturated, 60% saturated, which is huge. After the 6th post in a row, sponsored post, the audience is going to be like, okay, whatever, it's just doing it for the money. I don't trust him. And that's what most brands forget about. It's not about the reach. It's about the trust the audience has in the influencer. If the audience feels that something is off, they're just not going to convert. That should be the number one obsession for many brands. Is the audience going to trust the creator I'm working with if we do a collab tomorrow? So let's say tomorrow I work with, I don't know, someone in whatever in the sales space, and he's doing a partner post on Favikon saying, oh, influencer marketing software is so cool. You can find influencers like that. The audience could be like, sure, who cares? You're a salesperson. You talk about sales usually. Just doing it for the money doesn't mean shit. It's just going to flop. And he can be a great influencer. It doesn't matter. It's going to be great to do, I don't know, to advertise on Apollo or Lemnis or whatever, but not Favikon. I know that sounds very obvious, but trust me, we are talking to many brands, and for some reasons, most of them they're not reasoning that way.
And I suppose as well, it's the mental availability bit, isn't it? It's if you're a brand and you're going, okay, we're going to try this, and they keep seeing these people in their feeds, maybe we should try those because they're very present. But then when you actually look at it and tie it to a business outcome, you actually go, no, they're completely saturated. So it's not going to actually resonate with the audience.
It's funny because I see influencers now who are like bragging about having 300, 400, 500 brand deals on LinkedIn. And I'm like, that's the opposite of what you should brand. You 200%. The ROI for these creators is close to zero.
I would say I looked at examples before. When I was in LinkedIn, I used to work a lot with business schools, and I think they're a really good case study in terms of how we work with my business school and ESA. What they do sometimes is they will highlight some of the work that the faculty are doing, the professors, and within business schools, you have influencers is the wrong word, but you have some people that are subject matter experts. In IE, you have a couple, exactly, thought leaders. But they do it quite well in terms of they just really focus on the subject. They don't necessarily talk about the business school, but indirectly they're associated with the business school. And I always think that it's a good way that they do that because they're obsessed with what the subject is. But then as a consequence, people, they know them for that subject. And then they see, okay, they're a professor at this particular business school.
Yeah, exactly. And that's funny because I know LinkedIn, they change their position on the subject is that I know that they used to hate the word creator because LinkedIn doesn't want creators. That's something I keep saying is that they don't want creators. They want experts. They want people to create content around a subject of expertise or something. And I think 2 years ago, they were starting to realize that many people were creating content just for the sake of content creation. AI made it 100 times worse. LinkedIn was turning back into a spam platform, which is why they were really adamant on, okay, guys, just be an expert, be a thought leader, whatever, but don't be a creator. I think now things have changed a bit. I know they've relaunched a few programs, but I think it's very important to have in mind when you create content. Don't create content.
Definitely. The big thing around that was what happened was you probably saw on the app, they had this video logo or icon on the LinkedIn app about 18 months ago or 2 years ago, maybe it's 2 years ago now. And what happened was they were trying to make sure that there's more video content on the platform. And when people were going into the app, there was videos there, but the session times weren't so long. So it was a thing of supply really. So I think when they relaunched and they make sure that video is a priority, they wanted to ensure that they had enough content there so that they creators, so that's why they opened it up to go in this thing of like actually trying to get more creators onto the platform. Then on the text image, AI obviously made that much, much easier. But it's an interesting one because they do talk now about this brand link project that they have, but from what I see, it's very well known typical creators that are really well known. But it comes back to the point of if every brand is just to partner with those, it's not necessarily you're in that risk of saturation as well of, okay, this is a really big partnership with a big creator, but it might not have any connection with the brand that you're doing as well. It's the risk.
No, I think LinkedIn is in a, they don't want it, don't want to open it up too much because then they want to make sure that
What do you see for the future then? Because I saw you did a talk, I think it was 8 billion, no, in Dubai, or was it in Dubai or Abu Dhabi a couple of weeks ago? And what you were mentioning, and I think it's bang on. It's like some of the creators of the future aren't necessarily these ones that are viral. I agree. I think even despite that, it's never been a better time to stand out. If you have good insight, good story, it's actually easier to stand out because people are just putting out like a huge amount of volume, but people actually that curate, that have an opinion, that have an insight, have experience, people can really resonate with that. What is new and happening at Favikon over the next months? Great. We'll put the link on the show notes as well. The credibility authenticity score ranking as well, that's on the website as well. Now, for people that sign up and they can put in their LinkedIn and you basically correlate with what their content is versus their experience, and that evaluates how the score is calculated. No, okay, no, cool. No, and it's interesting because in LinkedIn as well, they release like a startup and they also release a business. They started doing it over the last 2 years, the business school list, and it was really funny because a lot of business schools, they look at like The Economist and the FT, and the editorial team would say, no, these business schools are complaining because they weren't ranked as where they should be. They want to know why. They want to know what the methods and everything. It's really funny. It's like rankings is definitely a thing. People, I think it's a good sign if people are complaining because it means that they have a value in it and they have a vested interest in it as well. Cool. We'll put the links on the show notes. Remy, thanks again for joining us. It was great speaking with you. You too. Cheers.